Hello, everyone, and welcome to a webinar on a very, very critical topic as on date because privacy is the buzz of the town, as you can see, and GDPR, of course, being the mothership of privacy. Um, Most of the requirements or most of the requests for webinars do come from that subject, and today's subject is very pointed. We've done many webinars on GDPR, as you can see from our YouTube link. And this is only from the data subject rights because this is apparently a very, confusing topic for many, and people are not able to understand many areas. So we decided to do a webinar just on this thing, that is data subject rights under GDPR, what an individual can request. Because, and of course, under GDPR, there is the possibility of people, users demanding the data for correction, updation, deletion, so many things. But is it a blanket right that the users have? If yes, when? If no, when? So we have in our previous webinars, we've covered this in bits and pieces. This is a focused webinar just on this topic alone. All right. So before we move ahead, a quick show of hands. Can you hear me properly? Is there any disturbance or anything? I'm just typing the same message out. In case there is any issue in hearing, please feel free to drop a message. Can you? Is there any problem in hearing me? You can just say a yes or partially yes or something. But can you hear me? Is this audible? Hello? Okay. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So I got a request for just raising my voice a bit, which I will. So thank you again. It's just my due diligence. Otherwise, I'll be yapping in air and you wouldn't understand anything. All right, so let's move ahead, roll ahead, and yeah. So these are the topics as you've got the invites. These are the points that will be covered under today's webinar. I don't want to read it again, but you can read it. It's there in your invite also. And of course, you get one CPE point, continued professional education point for attending a webinar. You can use it for multiple, certifications like CISA, CISSP, CRISC, CISM, PCI, QSA, so many webinars. But again, let me tell you very, you know, clearly that is we don't give any certificates. We've got hundreds of people attending a webinar. We do this thing for free. It's really not possible to print certificates and make certificates and send it to everyone individually. But do attend. You can just write it down in your when you fill up the form online on IC2 or ISACA that you attend a webinar, and sometimes the council might send us a request for confirmation. For that, we then check that day's schedule, whether you were there and you attended the webinar in entirety. In case you have attended, then we say a yes or we decline it. All right. So moving ahead, so be there till the end, and that's for free information resources. We are literally the number one on the internet for data security, content for information security. We've been doing our webinars diligently for more than 5 years now. And that's our YouTube channel. It is literally the number one across all our competitors. So feel free to just subscribe to it, click on the bell icon so you get access to new videos that we publish at least once a week or something. So, and all the information is free. We don't charge you anything. So do subscribe and let's move ahead quickly. Okay, as you go along, do not forget to type in your queries in the query box. In case you're watching this video on YouTube, do drop your queries in the comments. We do get back. In case you are one of the few lucky ones who get to attend the webinar live, you get to hear me live. Sorted your query live. All right. So what you can do is just drop in your query, and sometimes the queries are too much, so I cannot do all of them, but I'll try and do as much as possible. And in case I'm not able to do all of them, I promise you I'll get back to you personally and write you a specific one-on-one mail. All right. So thank you again, and let's go ahead. And yeah, as you go along, if you feel that there could be a new topic that we can cover in our next webinar, do drop in that also. Many of our webinars are just requests like the one that you're doing now from our valued audience as to what points we can cover. right? So do drop in your queries on that. Okay, this is about me. I want to get much into it. I've been there for like, wow, 30 years. Yeah. And out of that, I'm almost like 2 decades in Vista InfoSec. That's my company, and I'm myself PCI QSA, CISA, CSSP, CRS, 27001, even CEH, and many things. And we are there in multiple companies, multiple countries like US, UK, Canada, Singapore, India, and yeah, that's there, and that's where we are located. And yeah, towards the end, there is survey for participation, survey participation request. Just take you like 30 seconds. So we put in a lot of time and money on from our pocket for these webinars. Do provide your feedback, whether critical or positive. It gives a big boost to the team that works so much to bring this presentation to you. No, it's not just me, it's the whole team working together. It's not just me sending out the marketing mails or sending the invites and making the presentation, making it beautiful. That's not just me. And so there's a team working, so your feedback really goes a long way. So, and in case you're working on YouTube, do drop in a comment with your feedback. All right, thank you again. So I'll not get into the details of what is GDPR. If you need that, go across to again the YouTube channel I've shared. Go there, go into the GDPR playlist, HIPAA, and all the privacy playlists is there. You can see all the webinars over there. We have covered GDPR. What is GDPR more in detail? So GDPR, it was introduced on 25th of May 2018, and we have been there since before that actually. And it replaced the Data Protective Directive 9546 EC. And then this is more than a directive. This is actually a regulation now. So this aim to harmonize data protection regulations across the European Union and strengthens the rights of individuals regarding their personal data. So that was about it. So this is effective. So there is, okay, just to give you a brief, there is a GDPR UK and there is a GDPR EU after Brexit that happened. So, there has been some changes, and of course, there are not a huge amount of changes, but there are some minor changes. So GDPR EU and UK is like 95% the same. So of course, I'll not get into details again on GDPR and what it is about. You can read it or go through our previous webinars. So as per GDPR regulation, personal data is defined as any information related. So this is like GDPR's definition, right? I'm not making this up. So as per Article 4 in GDPR, it is defined as any information related to an individual or to an identified or identifiable natural person, right? A data subject. An identified natural person is one who can be identified directly or indirectly, in particular by reference to an identifier such as a name, identification number, location data, online identifier like a IP address or a handle or something, or to one or more physical factors specific to physical, psychological, genetic, mental, economic, cultural, or social identity of that natural person. So they have given a very wide description of what defines a natural person and what defines as information related to that identifiable natural person. So let's move ahead quickly. So GDPR, in essence, relates to any person which can help in his or her identification. So this can be anything. It can be name, email address, personal home address, phone number, anything. It can be included under GDPR, including their sexual orientation. It could be their racial or ethnic orientation, political affiliations, religious, philosophical beliefs, trade union membership, genetic data, fingerprints, physical, mental health description. All this comes under personal data as per GDPR, right? And so that is there. Then what can a individual request under GDPR? This is where the core of the webinar is all about. So then chapter 3, this is the most important part. Chapter 3 of GDPR outlines literally 8 crucial rights. All right. 8 crucial rights of data subjects whose data is processed by businesses for commercial purposes. Remember this, processed by businesses for commercial purposes. Now, as per this regulation, all information that store or transmit or process data are required to comply with it. So there is an or in between. Okay. Many companies feel that, oh, we are not storing personal data. No, no, we just see it, or we just look at it, or it just goes through a network, or we are not storing any data, they say. But yeah, it doesn't matter. If even if you're processing or transmitting without any storage, GDPR applies to you. So there is an or in between. That's not, um, and in between, right? So the rights aim to safeguard the fundamental rights and freedom of natural person in regards to their personal data. So these are the various articles now, what they can request under GDPR. So one is the right to be informed. So this is very beautifully written, actually, uh, and this shows where there is a huge difference between information security and privacy. Many people, even CIOs and CISOs, are not really clear on what is the difference between privacy and information security. Like most of the time, that becomes one of my, like a favorite question as to what is the difference between information security and privacy. And more than 90% of the time, that people say, people will say, okay, nobody should be able to see my personal data. That is privacy. So, these are the generic questions that people get. But this entire article can show you section 3, that is uh, chapter 3, can show you what is uh, different between information security or cybersecurity and privacy. Of course, they both move together, but they are not the same. So, individuals must be informed by organizations that they'll collect, process, and transmit the data. So, it cannot be done without their consent. That is what it means. So, consent is very important. That is, you need to take the person's uh, explicit authorization for collecting or processing or transmitting the data. So, even the individuals can ask the organization as to what kind of data will be used where, and the organization has to give a satisfactory true answer, right? And the next is right to access. So individuals have the right to obtain confirmation from the organization process as to whether their personal data is being processed. If it is, they have the right to access and receive information about it. So are they just collecting it for storage purpose, or they're going to process? What are they going to process it for? Is it going to be like a census, or is it going to be like a market survey, or are they going to use it for sending, making calls to me for sales, or are they going to use it for sending me further sales information, or do some cross selling, upselling, downselling, whatever they want to do? So they have the right, users have the right to know, to ask and get a valid response on what is this information going to be used for. In the right to rectification. So in case there is any data that is recorded incorrectly, so see, previously they have the right to access and data receive about information as to what they are going to process for, and the next is right to rectifications. So the individuals have the right to request the correction of inaccurate personal data. Now, remember, in this, it could be that when the person gave the information, it was correct, but then maybe a couple of years down the line, that changed. For example, an email address. For example, a phone number, for example, an email, physical house address. It could be marital, a status. It could be even my health status. So all those things are there. So they have the right to demand the rectification of their data on their collected with their consent by a collector or yeah. And the right to erasure. Article 17, organizations can ask individuals can ask the organization to erase data without undue delay. So over here, again, it is not a blanket right to erasure. For example, I have my bank records with my bank. It could be my loan records. And can I demand to the bank that, okay, you need to erase my loan records from your system? Are they supposed to be doing it? No. So there are checks and balances, or it could be, with a telecom. Telecom has my all my call records for whatever period of time. So am I in a position, or should I be allowed to, demand that is, see, delete all my call records? Should they be doing it? Or if I've taken a home loan, should they ask that after the loan is repaid that delete all my loan repayment records? No. So there are some checks and balances in this. So on what can be um, asked for eraser, what cannot be asked for eraser. But something like a Facebook, or it could be some social media account where you can simply demand the deletion of your account in perpetuity. So those things, there are some checks and balances in that. It's not blanket. And the right to restrict processing. Individuals can request the right restriction of processing under certain conditions. So I can say that okay, I've given my data to a bank for maybe creating a bank account, but I can say that I don't want this bank to be contacting me for sales and insurance, or giving my data to their sales and insurance arms for calling me for their businesses. So those things I can say you cannot be, sharing my data with even your subsidiaries without my consent, or even their own businesses without my consent. So many of these banks also deal in mutual funds, insurance, investments. I can say you cannot be using my data over there. That's there. And the right to data portability. So individuals have the right to receive data they provided in a data control to a data controller in a structured, commonly used, and machine readable format. Let's say they can also demand that the data be directly transmitted from one controller to another controller where technically feasible. What I mean by that, again, so I've got my health records with X insurance body, and now I want to shift my entire health records to a different insurance body. I am in a position, and I should be allowed to do that. So that is what is meant by data portability. I hope you are all okay with what I'm saying, and any questions so far, please feel free to drop it in and I'll take it up immediately. Okay. Then the next is the right to object. So again, same with right to restrict processing, same as on the same lines we have right to object, where individuals have the right to object. So they can say, as I said, you cannot be using it for anything else. You cannot be using my data for sharing it with your other bodies, or with some other arms of business, or with your sister concerns or other subsidiaries. So I can simply say that, or I can simply even say that you cannot be sending my data out of this country, because I don't want my data to be touched on by some call center somewhere in China or Philippines or something. So those are the things that can be done. And the rights related to automated decision making and profiling. Again, this is very, very concerning. Um, so I can even say that, okay, you can use my data for data analytics, but not for profiling. Okay, so for coming to know, okay, how many people in this area are Democrats or Republicans, or having a particular health issue or something like that. So you cannot be cannot be using this data for any sort of profiling, especially racist-based profiling. So again, this right is subject to certain exceptions and safeguards, especially by law enforcement agencies. Then there are the ethical concerns, that is consent and transparency. So this is what we discussed. The first thing, that is the requirement for obtaining explicit consent. Um, you know, um, so you can say that the organization might say that, okay, they have obtained consent, but they have not really given the full understanding to the individual as to why they are collecting, for what they are collecting. And many a time, we see these check boxes that are consent, but how many has actually consented in a voluntary manner that they are okay with one, two, three things? So many a time it is not really voluntary. So there are the genuine understanding. See, has any of you in this webinar or anywhere really read those 10-page privacy policies to come to know what are your rights and what are you voluntarily agreeing to or giving consent for? Typically, it's just like one checkbox so the application can go ahead and do whatever you want to do. So then the next is the data minimization. So data minimization is the balance between collecting necessary data for legitimate purpose and minimizing. So this is the need to know. So for whatever purpose they are collecting the data, are they collecting only that amount of data, or are they collecting a bit more? So if they are doing some sort of a survey in a particular area as to, uh, you know, maybe how many of the people in a particular area or region are using a particular brand of shoes, and that profiling is age based. So in that case, I need not collect their phone number, father's name, mother's name, address, and all those things. I can simply be in that area and take their maybe perhaps their names, maybe in short, and or and their age, and then without the date of birth, and then get my data out. So it's the base minimum required. And the next is right to access and rectification. So here the issue becomes is that would people actually give access to the data for processing and rectification and access in a time-bound manner or no, or would they be charging for it? Or maybe give it after 2 months. So this is where the ethical concerns are there. And GDPR has come up with some good checks and balances so that this cannot be misused and people are, given access to the data without, undue delays. And then there is a data security. See, if organizations are meeting the high standards of data security outlined in GDPR to prevent unauthorized access. So, one thing is there about individual rights, but you have to understand that privacy always rides on information security, whether it is confidentiality or availability or integrity. These are not really inbuilt into privacy basic definitions. And that is where I really love the standard GDPR because it's one of those few standards that's even got information security requirements built into it. So when somebody is, you know, given proper mandates for protection user rights, they've even given mandates on how they should be actually be collecting and managing the data and safeguarding the data. So this is where the data security articles come into place. So whether this is adequate or not is also becomes an ethical concern sometimes. And then there's a automated decision making and profiling. And so without human intervention and what safeguards are there? Because see, these are gray areas, and people can argue it out either this way or that way. So the point that needs to be checked is, um, are they ethically sound? Are they actually doing good business practices, or they are misusing the trust of their users to exploit the data for further commercial use? And the next is the data protection impact assessments, DPIA. So this is where organizations are required to conduct DPIAs to assess and mitigate risk associated with the data processing activities. And many companies do not do it in the right spirit, and more often than not, it's just like a tick mark that they do to achieve what has been asked from them. So this is where again people need to be careful about. And then again, there is the international data transfer consideration. So these are also part of the rights of the individual. So if the data is passed outside of the European Union, and so whether there are adequate safeguards in place or not. So what I mean by that, so for example, there is a company in the UK, and there has been an unfortunate data compromise. So literally speaking, they are as good as dead. There'll be heavy penalties, even though it was an oversight. And I'm not saying whether GDPR penalizing is right or not. Of course, they need to have the checks and balances to maintain the seriousness of the standard. But what if this company in UK has, or in maybe Spain or Germany or somewhere, they have passed on this data to a company based in, say, India or in Philippines, and that company has been very lax in maintaining the data security, and the data goes out. So how will they be penalized? Because they are out of jurisdiction of GDPR. They cannot be penalized. So this is where the ethical concerns comes into place, and where companies, before outsourcing the data or doing some international data transfers, have adequate checks and balances in place. Now, ensuring adherence to GDPR, it requires a very comprehensive approach involving legal compliance, organizational policies, and procedures. And so here we just listed out some key steps. Of course, for audit purposes and for compliance purposes, we have had a full webinars to discuss that point. And again, if you haven't seen them or if you would like to see them, you can head out to our YouTube channel as I've listed out, and you can view those webinars for free, and you'll learn quite a bit. All right, so I'm just touching the surface over here. So there is, of course, the data protection policies and procedures for ensuring lawfulness, for collecting the data for legitimate purposes, and ensuring data is adequate and relevant and limited. That is just on a need to know basis, data is collected and not just in excess. Because many a time, companies collect data with a thought process, oh, we might need it in the future. We never know, you see. So let us just collect and keep it. Anyway, it is not causing any harm. That becomes the basic justification for over collection of data, and that is what GDPR doesn't allow. And then, of course, giving people or the users the facility to upgrade or maintain the accuracy of the data, and there is no storage limitation of the personal data. But of course, there could be some scientific or historical research purposes data that might be stored by the provider as per the requirements in Article 89(1). And then, of course, Article 5(1), which speaks about ensuring that integrity and confidentiality of the data. And just to reiterate again, many a time people confuse privacy with confidentiality. These are literally two different things. All right. Now, for ensuring adherence, uh, the primary load or the primary burden or the primary responsibility for principles under this Article 5(1) is comes on the controller. So there is a controller and the processor. So these are two separate roles. It's a different thing altogether. Again, to get into those details, you can view our webinars on that. And then, of course, the data mapping. And so there is a heavy record management requirement under GDPR for both controllers and processors to maintain a record of what they are processing, why they are processing, and how the same has been processed. And then there is a breach management. So unfortunate systems that there is a breach, how that breach will be managed. So that's where the breach management requirements comes into place, and the minimum and the maximum delays that can happen for informing to the data subjects and to the supervisory authority, which is the ICO, um, Information Commissioner's Office, is 72 hours. That's it, not more than that. And it's not 72 working hours, it is 72 calendar hours. So 3 consecutive days, calendar days, not working days. All right. And the consent management. So you will have to prove, if you are the controller and you are getting the data collected, it is up to you to prove, okay, that the consent was given freely and given in a specific instance, and the users were informed with the unambiguous indication of what the data subject's rights are and for the purpose for which it is being collected. Then next is the data inventory. Whether it is a controller or a processor, they need to maintain a record of what data is being processed in their responsibility. And then there is a training and management article, which again applies to both controller and processor, to provide adequate training to to the people handling the privacy data, not just at the time of joining, but even on a regular basis. And this training should include a listing of also what is the roles and responsibilities with regards to the privacy data being processed. It cannot be just a generic why privacy, why GDPR is important, and how it helps the company. That you have to do, but it has to get very specific also. And again, the relevant data protection training. So if somebody is having permanent regular access, then the training requirements are different, and they have to be very specific on that. And then, of course, the involvement of a DPO. So in in case of sensitive data being processed, and in the case of um, large amount of data being processed, it's mandatory to have a DPO. So what are the roles and responsibility of a DPO, you ask? Well, again, I'm sorry, there is just too much data to be for me to cover in this webinar. Please head out and do view our webinars, earlier webinars, and you will get those answers also. And then involvement of the data processing or protection officer is required for monitoring the compliance with the GDPR. The information security officer and the data processing officer should not be the same. And the data protection officer, whomsoever is there, should be knowing how GDPR management or GDPR compliance is being done. You should be having a background in compliance and privacy. You cannot just pick up the person who is not doing anything in the company and give him or her the task of being a data processing officer. So I hope you're getting what I'm saying. Many a time we have seen companies just picking up, oh, who's sitting free? Get that person and tell him to be the DPO. That is really not acceptable. Okay, so be very careful in that. You know, again, there's a seventh supplemental principle called as a verification, and the privacy shield requires verification via self-assessment. So all organizations must attest that training procedures have taken place and are complete. So again, a quick FAQs that we always come up with. That is GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, and all the individuals refers to all the individuals in the EU and the European Economic Area. And what does GDPR apply to? All organizations that process or store or transmit personal data of individuals located in the European Union. It could be businesses, non-profit organizations, even government agencies. So unlike some countries where in a very laughable manner the government agencies are kept outside of the ambit of the privacy laws in under GDPR, the government agencies are also held responsible for their actions or inactions, whatever that may be. And so key principles of GDPR as per seven key principles defined in Article 5 of GDPR, and they are as lawfulness, fairness, and transparency, as you've seen. Purpose limitation, as you've seen, that only on a need to use, need to know basis data is collected. And data minimization, again, least bit stored or processed or transmitted. Accuracy on an ongoing basis, not just the first time. Storage limitation, again, you're storing only what is needed to be stored and not otherwise. So if you just need it for a one-off thing, why you are storing it? So integrity and confidentiality again required, because many privacy standards you've seen doesn't include integrity and confidentiality, but you need to have another standard like an ISO or something to manage integrity and confidentiality. But that's not the case under GDPR, which it is like a comprehensive standard in itself. And accountability of the individuals and companies for the data that they are processing. So what is the criteria for determining GDPR fines and penalties? Again, there is a data privacy protection regulator in each of the countries, literally, and there is an ICO office, Information Commissioner's Office. So the concerned authority will determine whether an infringement has occurred and the severity of the incident and the penalties to be levied. And then the criteria is very simple. Uh, That is the nature and the gravity of the infringement, intentional or non-intentional, subject affected, mitigation strategy. So even if it is non-intentional, they will also be looking at, um, you know, whether this was carelessness or this was like a genuine issue that happened in the organization. So if it is carelessness, then you you are in for a big time mess anyway. And how cooperative they are with the authority, how much information are actually hidden, all those things, what data category, because there are special data categories also that are covered under more stringent requirements for privacy. So, and then of course, then adhere is to the approved code of conduct. And what is the penalties for non-compliance? So the first is 10 million euros or 2% of the global company's global turnover under Article 83.4, and the second time it is 20 million euros or 4% of the global company's global turnover, whichever is higher. So that's how the penalties are extremely, extremely severe. And then who is the data protection officer? This is what we covered just some time back also. He is the main point of contact and the person responsible for privacy in any organization. Okay, you can't just, as I said, take up any person sitting idle and make him the DPO because you need to have a DPO. You need to prove that the person is actually capable of delivering on the designation, right? Okay, so that brings me to the end of the webinar. And this is a brief about our company. That's again our YouTube channel that you can visit. You already have our uh, YouTube link in the chat box, and our link, our LinkedIn page, our Facebook page, and those are our contact details. So I really hope that you have loved the webinar. It was helpful to you and to your organization. As we end the webinar, do drop in your queries if you have any, or um, just finish that. If you can help us out with that survey request, it will not take you more than 30 seconds. Please do help us out with that to help us understand how we can do better. And do drop in your suggestions for the next time's webinar also. Thank you again for giving your time. Take care and God bless you. Bye bye.